In this lesson, I want to take a few moments to show how to create a Hello World application in Scala, specifically Scala 3 and with the scala-cli command. So right now I have this empty directory, and what I want to do, I'll just create a file, an empty file named hello.scala. Then I will open that with TextMate. So in a previous lesson, I showed how to create a method or function like this. So I create a method named double, and it takes a int parameter named I, returns an int, and then the body of the function is I times 2. And one thing to note here is that this, because it's a one-line function, I put the body right there, but in a multiple line function, you would move the body down there. And so I can add a comment here. So now that's a function with a body that's 2 lines long. The reason I show that is because in Scala 3, the way you start an application is also with a method, but it's a special method called a main method. So we start it with an @main annotation, and then the method can actually be named anything you want, so I'll just call it hello. And then I will say it's not going to take any input parameters, and it's not going to return anything, so we use the unit return type. When you have a function or method that doesn't return anything or doesn't return anything useful, you declare the unit return type. So then I'll say I want to do a print line and hello world. So that'll be, this area here is my full main method. And again, the main method is the entry point to your application. So I'll delete the stuff at the top because I don't need that anymore. Let's save that. Then we go back to the terminal. And with scala-cli, it's actually really easy to run this. You just say scala-cli hello.scala. And that compiles and runs your application as shown. So then the next thing I'm going to do is I come back here to my main method, and now I want to accept a parameter, an input parameter. So I'll say name :string. So the input parameter is named name, and its type is string. So I'm going to delete that, and I'll say plus name. And this isn't the best way to do things right here, but it is a way we can concatenate 2 strings. So I'm showing how to do that now, and that's similar to Java and other languages in terms of concatenating 2 strings. So I'll save that and go back here. And now when I try to run this again, I'll get an error because it's saying, oh, you didn't give me any command line arguments. And I especially wanted to show you this because if you try to put the command line argument right there with scala-cli, you'll get another error. And the short version of the answer is scala-cli requires that little indentation right there, so you just put dash dash before your input parameters. So that's pretty cool. That's a little hello world application that takes in 1 input parameter, and we can modify that too. So the first thing I would do here, now we're kind of going into bonus rounds here, but the first thing I would do is if you put the letter S before a string, that means I want you, Mr. Scala compiler, I want you to interpolate what's inside these double quotes. And what that allows me to do is I can put the variable name there, preceded by a $, as shown. And then this refers to this variable right here. And that's a lot easier to use, especially as the string gets larger. It's much easier and more convenient to use than concatenating strings. So we come back here and we can run that again, make sure that works. And it does indeed work. And then if you want to say, how about if I prompt the user for their first name and their last name, both of which are strings, then I would do that. Then I could change that to first name. What's going on? I didn't spell that right. First name and $ last name. And then we go back to the command line. Again, you'll get an error if you only have 1 input parameter. So it's actually really smart. So it's saying, oh, you have 1 input parameter here, but you've defined 2. Let me make a little more room there. You defined 2 parameters, 1 here and 1 here. So I'm expecting 2 input parameters. So you get an error until you add that second one. And one more thing I want to show, since we're in bonus territory here, is that you can create let's create another file here. I'm gonna be lazy. I'm gonna copy all that. I'm gonna create another file, and I will call it, how about functions.scala. And so in this functions file, I want to create a function. We'll call it print name. So print name is the name of the function. It takes these two input parameters, first name and last name, as strings. It doesn't return anything, so we use the unit type, and then it does the print line, just like I did before. Then I'll go back to hello Scala, and instead of calling that, then I will say, what did I call that? Print name. So I'll say print name, and I want to pass it first name and last name. So then I'll save that. So now notice that part of my code is in this file called hello.scala, and the other part of the code is over here in a file named functions. So I'll go back here. Now, the reason I'm showing that, let me clear this, is that a nice thing that scala-cli lets you do is if you have an application that's in multiple files like this, instead of saying scala-cli hello.scala, you just say run the code that's in the current directory, and you do that with that dot symbol. And of course, in the Unix world, the dot represents the current directory, so we run it like that, and we get the same answer as before. So this dot feature is really, really cool. As your application grows into multiple files, you can still keep compiling and running it with a simple command like this. If I covered any of that too fast, just go ahead and rewind the video. Otherwise, we'll be covering scala-cli much more throughout this course.